Holy. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me. Welcome to the national headquarters of the Theosophical Society in America. My name is John Gianjosi. I'm the Director of Public Programs, and at this time, please turn off your cell phones and other noise-making electronic devices. This evening's lecture is being streamed live, so I also welcome friends watching through the internet. The Theosophical Society promotes study, meditation, and service. We encourage open-minded inquiry into the world religions, philosophy, science, and the arts. And we have a deep respect for the unity of all life. Our goal is to help people explore the spiritual path so as to arrive at a deeper understanding regarding the wisdom of the ages. Furthermore, we believe that this wisdom is not limited to any one tradition, and thus we offer programs from many traditions. I invite you to pick up one of our program catalogs where you'll find all the programs that are being offered during the next few months. These programs are also listed on our website, and there you can register for those that are of interest to you. Most of you are familiar with the Theosophical Society and the various resources that we have here. In addition to our public programs, we do have a wonderful library, bookshop, and 40 acres of parkland, to which you're always welcome. This evening, I'm very happy to be able to introduce Juliana Cesano, who is known to most of you here. She is a second-generation Theosophist and has been actively involved with the Society's work for over 20 years. She may not look like it. Sorry, Juli. She spent 2 years volunteering at the international headquarters in Chennai, India, before becoming a staff member at the Theosophical Society here in Wheaton. She is also a certified yoga teacher and teaches a weekly yoga class here on Tuesday nights, to which you're all welcome. And currently she is the manager of the Quest Bookshop, which is a lovely bookshop to visit. But importantly, this evening she is here to speak on the mystery and power of the Heart Center. Please join me in welcoming Juliana Cesano.
Well, thank you so much for being here tonight. This may be a subject for the few, apart from the fact that it's raining. But in general, it is a subject that not many people are interested in. Before we begin, I would like to make sure that we all know that this is the 45 minutes or the hour that we will spend here together. Is a work that we're doing together. It's I will be saying most of the words, if not all of them, but that doesn't mean that I am the one.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Could you just check to see that it's turned on? It doesn't seem to be magnifying.
Oh, okay.
It's on.
It is on?
But we're not getting any sound.
Okay. I don't know if...
Keep speaking. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. We can actually fix it before we begin, and that will be best. If it's... Can you hear me now? A little better? Okay. So probably the problem is here and not over there, so everybody at home hopefully is hearing. So we'll start again and saying thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And before we begin, I would like to invite you to become an active participant of this work that we're doing together tonight. This is a work that comes from the heart, speaks from the heart. So as you sit on your chairs, just take a few deep breaths and become fully aware of this moment. Good. And bring your attention to the center of your chest as you open your eyes and I begin to speak. The mystery and power of the heart center. This has been a very important subject to me. It's been the major practice I have had throughout the years. And if we look into the major traditions, we'll see that the mentions of the heart, the times the heart is mentioned as the spiritual center in the human being are countless. We can start with Hinduism. And if you look at the Upanishads, almost in every section of it, there is a mention of the heart, the Purusha, the spirit within the heart, and how to become in touch with it. Each tradition has its own practice, its own method, but essentially they're all the same and they move in the same direction. In Christianity, we find mystics across the board speaking of the heart. It is so touching when you read them, when you read what they wrote, and find so many commonalities across traditions. These are people who never met each other. There wasn't internet at the time. You couldn't find, there was barely books available to find information. And when you read that they describe this heart almost identically, you have to believe that there is some truth behind it. In the same way, Sufism brings a lot on the heart, and we can even say that the Sufi way is the way of the heart, is the way of love. And what is the heart but love with capital L? And also Theosophists, people who were associated with the Theosophical Society in its modern version, modern meaning 150 years ago. But throughout, beginning with H.P. Blavatsky, the spiritual founder of the Theosophical Society, all the way through other Theosophists, we find also countless mentions of the heart. Practices involved with it, but also what the heart means. So in the way I see it is that all these teachers, all these enlightened beings, all these people who had spiritual experiences said, do you really want to know who you truly are? And you can rephrase this question. They have said, do you want to know God? Do you want to know the mysteries of the universe and the human being? And the answer was, from these people, the answer was always the same: look within your heart. But what does that mean? You know, sometimes we talk about not interpreting scripture literally. And we talk about the importance of understanding metaphor within the teachings. So what is this talking about? Is this talking about the actual heart? Is it talking about a center, a space? Is it a word that refers to something else? I don't know if I have the answers to that, but what I'm going to share with you tonight is what I have found so far to make sense to me. So you'll see that many times when when this question is, do you want to know God? Do you really want to know who you are? And we're told, look within the heart. Most of humanity has the tendency to say, nah, let me look everywhere else first, and then maybe when things get really tough, I'll look within. Maybe I can prove the brightest souls wrong. Saint Augustine, who was a Christian mystic, said, I sought you without, and then I found you in the midst of my heart. And I think that's what happens to most of us. We seek without. By the way we are built as human beings, we are built to externalize, to be aware of what is outside of us. Our mind is so strong, and the way we're built, we are built to perceive through the senses. And what the senses perceive are mostly outside of us. So we're constantly externalizing. And so if you notice, even if you have the intention of centering yourself in your heart, you will notice that the habit and the tendency is always to be outside. Is to seek distraction, is to seek entertainment, is to seek to be busy with something else. And it's so simple just to go within. It is so extremely simple. You need absolutely nothing. You can be standing, you can be sitting, you can be working, you can be talking to someone. It doesn't necessarily have to be a practice. And this is probably the most important point, I think, of this talk. That here, we're not talking about a sitting practice. A practice that you only do 20 minutes, an hour a day. The living in the heart is a way of living. And it's possible to live from the heart. Of course, the sitting practice is something that helps us tremendously. It is the moment in which we focus our whole intention. We train ourselves to have a different habit of mind. So then that serves us, that helps us in what we call daily living, when we're interacting, doing, working, moving. So we can start by asking the question, what is the heart then? I have the impression that the heart has been a little bit misunderstood, and that many times it has been related to our emotional nature. It has been connected to like a sentimental way of being. But the heart that these teachers spoke about has very little or nothing to do with emotions. It is as if someone wanted to know how a still lake looks like. And you start describing it by the mud that is underneath. That is not the essential aspect of a lake. The lake is not that mud. Yeah, the mud is there. So to me, that's a way of seeing, of interpreting this heart. Yes, the heart has an emotional nature, but the heart these teachers spoke of is something completely different. We may even say that it's not even love in a personal way, in the personal way that we know love. So they said, this heart is a place in which the divine abides, the place in which spirit, God, the eternal, whatever way you want to call it, the universal order, love with capital L, sometimes called unconditional love, That is a place within. That is a place in the body in which we can find divinity. Some people say, well, I don't believe in God. And usually my reply is, well, let's talk first about what you think God is. If you think God is a guy who has a long beard and sits on a cloud, I don't believe in God either. If you believe that God is someone we can personify, we can, bring elements of humanity into, I also don't believe in God. But do you believe in the solar system? Can you notice that the solar system works with tremendous perfection? That its beauty allows this planet to exist. If we were slightly closer to the sun, we would burn. If we were slightly away from it, we would also die. We would freeze. So how is it that we find ourselves exactly at the point that we need to be for life to be possible on Earth? And every single aspect of nature and the universe, that intelligence that sometimes is also called love, what sustains the entire universe, is within ourselves. Ramana Maharshi, who was a Hindu sage and mystic, he said, the entire macrocosm is within the heart. Consider that for a moment. The entire macrocosm is within the heart. And these people were not speaking metaphorically. Of course, we will not be able to find physically the macrocosm within us, but there's certainly a message to pay attention to there. Sometimes I like to call the heart the unknown. Because when we place a word, when we label the heart in some way, we may seek in that direction, and that can become an impediment. So sometimes it's better not to name it, to see something I don't know. It's a mystery. But it hides the secrets. It hides all the secrets. So is it worth it looking within? Another question we can ask is, where is the heart? Does it have a location? Some teachers spoke of the heart being on the left side of the chest, where the actual organ is. The teachers spoke of the heart being slightly to the right. Others spoke of the heart being in the right in the center of the chest. Others said it's slightly away from the body. So what I feel is the heart is wherever we find it. And we have to do the work and see where the heart is for us. And that takes time. I would say it's like around the center of the body. And sometimes it's specifically recommended that you do not, like if you do a meditation practice, for example, center on the heart, it is recommended that you do not necessarily focus on the organ, because you can affect the organ with your mind, the rhythm of the heart. So as long as you don't do that, you can just center around the area of the heart. But it's a kind of a relationship that we establish with something with which we don't have a relationship right now. It is as if I told you, I come here today and I say, you have a third arm and you have to find it. So that would take time. And then establishing a relationship with that arm and using it. So the way I see it is the physical heart is the densest aspect of a heart that has no limits. So at other levels, the heart is immeasurable. But then as we manifest in this physical world, it's the final link of the chain is this physical world. And the actual physical organ, the heart as the organ, is that densest aspect of this heart place. In the same way, the reason why I'm saying this is because H.P. Blavatsky, and I'm going to call her HPB from now on to make it easier. She says, the heart is the center of the spiritual consciousness, as the brain is the center of the intellectual consciousness. So it gives you the sense that, thoughts are separated from the mind. And thoughts are separated from the brain. So in the same way, we have the organ, the heart. But there's a wisdom and intelligence and unconditional love that finds its seat in the physical heart. HPB says, there is a tiny violet light within the heart that is the first one to live in the fetus and the last one to die as a person leaves this physical world. She says, the center of all, Brahma, the seat of life. On the other hand, Saint Teresa of Avila, who was a mystic, a Christian mystic from a completely different tradition, she says, there is within you a palace of surpassing splendor. For no building can be compared in beauty and magnificence with a soul that is pure and filled with virtues. In the midst of this palace dwells the great king who deigns to be your constant guest. Who deigns to be your constant guest. And here he sits upon a throne of priceless value, and this throne is your own heart. So how is it that we're not seeking within the heart? How is it that we're not taught when we're born to seek within? There are two key words in Saint Teresa's phrase: purity, and virtue. And I'm going to ask you to remember those two words. Another image that has been helpful to me is the image of the sun. You know that ancient traditions have regarded the heart, have regarded the sun as God. It has been worshipped as God. And you find that sometimes this heart is described as the sun, as above, so below. As it is in the solar system, it is within. So in the center is the sun, and the sun is God. In Sufism, there is this turning around your own left foot. So you place your left foot on the floor, and with your right foot you turn counterclockwise around your own center. And the teacher who was teaching this, Puria Montessori, who was here a few weeks ago, said, we're turning counterclockwise, like the planets turn around the sun. I didn't know that. I didn't know the planets turn counterclockwise around the sun. So, in the imitation of that macrocosmic process, at this human level. We turn around this sun within that is in our heart, but it's also everywhere else. So the sun is the solar system within us. There's also scientific research about the heart. I don't know if you have heard of the Heart Math Institute. And this is an organization that has been doing research for the last 30 years. And I am so glad they did, because they were the first ones who, I may be wrong, but I think they were the first ones who thought, well, we know so much about the brain. You know, the brain is, we can say, it's just like any other organ. How is it that we discovered that the brain had so many functions? We simply studied it. But someone thought, hey, how about we study the heart as an organ and see if there's anything that we can learn from it? So they did this particular study. They sat people in front of a screen and they showed them two sets of images. One group of images was all images that were peaceful, pleasant, nature-like, neutral. And another group of images that were more shocking or painful. And they hooked cables from the brain and from the heart to different monitors, measuring the waves of brain, measuring the waves of heart. So they mix these images around, and any of them will come up, and there's going to be a reaction. So there was a clear reaction from the brain with the positive or neutral images, and a clear reaction from the heart. So then what happened was that they waited 3 seconds before they showed the next image, and these are randomly put together. So you don't know which image is going to show up. And then they waited 10 seconds to show the image. And what they found was that the heart knew which image or what kind of image was coming up, while the brain had no idea. The wavelength of the heart drops. One of the negative images or more shocking images is going to come up on the screen. So they conclude that there is within the heart a center of wisdom and intuition. And these are actually their words. Wisdom and intuition. The heart knows things that the mind doesn't. Now HPB says quite a few remarkable things about the heart. She says, if you could remember your dreams in deep sleep, you would be able to remember all your past lives. This is the memory of the heart. And this is also why so many traditions speak of remembrance, remembering, and that remembering comes from the heart. The theory from the heart math people is that what we call intuition is something that comes first from the heart, and a signal is sent to the brain. And that's how we think we know. But we normally believe that it's the opposite direction. HPB says that when we think, there is a vibration in the pineal gland. We have this little gland in the middle of the brain. So when we think, there is vibration. The aura, the energy field of the pineal gland vibrates. That vibration resonates or creates or begins a vibration of the aura of the heart. She says there are 7 brains within the heart. I really don't know what she means by that. There are 7 brains in the heart. So, as we think, then I was saying, the aura of the pineal gland vibrates, and then the aura of the heart begins to vibrate, and then those 7 brains become active. But then she says, if the heart could, in its turn, become become positive, in the sense that become the ones that influence, instead of being the brain influencing the heart, and impress the brain, then spiritual consciousness would reach the lower consciousness. So the heart would reach the mind, and this is when we have insight, intuition, spiritual experience, knowing, direct knowing, wisdom. Now, the condition, there are quite a few conditions for this to happen, but the basic one is that, think for a moment what happens when you want to say something to someone who's constantly talking. There's no chance that you can say a word if that person is always talking. So with the heart and the brain, and with the heart and the mind, something very similar happens. We're constantly active intellectually. We say things, we think things, we tell ourselves things, we create stories around things. So there's this, normally, the average person, let's say, has this constant chatter. So the heart has no chance to say what it knows. So the first condition is silence and stillness of the mind. But it's also the capacity to listen deeply, and to be very, very patient too. Because we think that the moment we're still, we're going to hear something. But it is like with everybody else. We need to establish a relationship, a connection. Going back to Ramana Maharshi from the Hindu tradition, he says, when the mind goes out through the brain, when consciousness, when awareness goes out through the brain and the sense organs, the names and forms appear. But when it stays in the heart, the names and forms disappear. So whenever we externalize, we go out through the brain, through the senses. There is separation. There is me and you. There's me and the chairs and this place. The moment we gather our whole attention to the heart, we're one. There's no outside of us, inside of us, the other person and myself. That is, duality or separation is a condition of the mind, not of the heart. So we become one with whatever it is that we are perceiving. Now what happens is that this, we're so used to thinking that we are the doers, we are the ones who make things happen. That when it comes to this practice, we also feel and think that we are doing this. And at the beginning we're just bringing the intention of listening. We're bringing the intention of being present, of gathering our whole attention to the heart. So that is actually active, something active that we do. But eventually, it is not us who speak. It is not us who bring this light. We're just the ones who are receiving it. We're the ones who are open to it. HBB says, this spiritual consciousness cannot be guided by a person. until this person is completely united with Buddhi Manas. And when she uses these two terms, she's talking about the mind, and we can use the word unconditional love. So when that union occurs, then we are, it can be guided by the person consciously. But she says, until then, it guides him if it can. That is, makes efforts to reach him, to impress the lower consciousness. And those efforts are helped by his or her, of course, growth in purity. So there comes purity again. HPV wrote a kind of guidance for this journey of life, and she called it the golden stairs. At the end of that prayer, if you want to call it prayer, she says, these are the golden stairs, up the steps of which the learner may climb to the temple of divine wisdom. And the very first step of this ladder, of these stairs, is a clean life. So we're going to see that there are conditions. And when she says a clean life, she's not talking about, of course, brushing our teeth. It's talking about, yes, of course, taking care of the body and clean it and wash it. That's important. But it's talking about the purity of what we think, the purity of what we feel, the purity of what we say, the company we keep, the places we go to, the way we keep things around us. So that in a way is creating a space in which the heart feels at home, in which the heart feels safe to speak. It's a very sacred, a very intimate relationship. And that's why those conditions are there. A couple of things that I want to share in case they help. In this subject, all the words that we can use are so limited, but maybe a few images can help. How do we actually do this work? We will be working more in detail on this on Saturday. But here are some ideas, thoughts, and experiences. So you probably have noticed that everything in nature expands and contracts. I feel that part of this work is just moving along with the rhythm of life. And if you notice, the closest to you is inhalation and exhalation. There is this contraction and expansion constantly. Nature repeats itself everywhere. And this pattern repeats the expansion and the contraction. We'll see some of the expansion and contractions we don't see because they happen so slowly. But sometimes we can see it in the flowers that open up at night and close during the day, or vice versa, this contraction and expansion. There's also more general expansions and contractions. The astrologers talk about Saturn and Jupiter. When Saturn visits you, comes around, and it affects your natal chart in a particular way. There is restriction. Things are difficult. There is contraction. When Jupiter comes around, there is expansion. You have energy to go your way. Everything seems to be flowing along. Universally, there are what they're called in Hinduism, manvantaras and pralayas. times of activity, times of rest. When you practice asanas in Hatha Yoga, there is elements of in each posture. There are two movements, and you can move with the breath. As you inhale, you find length. You lengthen your spine. And as you exhale, you move deeper into the pose. You surrender into the pose. So these are all images that can help us notice how is it that we move through this heart process, through this journey of the heart. Sometimes with expansion, sometimes with contraction. Other two words that relate to that are remembering and forgetting. What is it that we want to remember? What is it that we need to forget? There is a book that has been very helpful. It has helpful to me. It has a lot of the teaching is very practical but very profound. It is called The Cloud of Unknowing, and it was written by a Christian mystic. He never or she never said her or his name, so it's an anonymous work. In that work, there is something described, and the teacher says, the one who speaks says, visualize underneath you a cloud, and place on that cloud every experience you have had, every person you have met, everything you think you know, everything you know and think you know. And just drop it in the cloud. And that cloud is called the cloud of forgetting. And this is by no means, this is something that is trying to, put you in a place in which you don't care about these things, or you repress aspects of yourself you don't want to remember. This has to do, I believe, with a work of letting go of what is not important. All the things we tend to carry on our shoulders that don't matter at all. So placing those aspects in that cloud of forgetting. And leaving, so when you leave behind all that, what remains? What remains is this pure intent, this naked awareness. You're not caught up in what happened. You're not caught up in what you know. You're not caught up in your own expectations. You're just there. You drop everything on that cloud of forgetting. And then remembering. So it's a work of forgetting and a work of remembering. How's it possible? They're kind of opposites, but what is it that we need to remember? And this is something that not only that you can do as you have a meditation practice, this is something you can do at work. We feel bothered by things that happen constantly. And the moment those things happen, something triggers within, discomfort, conflict, whatever it is. We can immediately drop it in the cloud of forgetting. We choose to hold on to it, but we can immediately drop it. So that constant forgetting of things that don't matter. And then the remembering what we already are, who we already are. The Christian mystic spoke of the constant remembrance in the heart. So keeping our attention in that center and remembering that power that is already within. Some experiences in life make this remembering or bring this remembering more alive than other experiences. And sometimes we have to see through those to remember. There are small things in life that are going to trigger something within, and we're going to say, yeah, I think I remember. And it's not a remembering from here. It is a remembering from here. So a couple of weeks ago, I was sitting up in my living room and looking through the window. And at a certain time of the day, the sun hits directly on the trees and leaves in the backyard of my house. There's a lot of trees there. So the sun was hitting on the trees, the trunk of the trees and the leaves were dancing, with the breeze. And every time I see this, every time I happen to see this, it's almost like breathtaking. It is so beautiful. It brings the light, brings all the beauty on the leaves, all the beauty of the sky, of the air around, of the ground. It is just a painting. Every day is a painting. Just to be able to take this in, I closed my eyes for a moment, and they went, probably was a longer moment than I thought. And then when I opened my eyes, everything was gone. It was still light outside, but the leaves were dull. The trees were almost unseen. So in that moment, it was like, that is how the light that shines from within, from the heart, makes everything beautiful. It reveals the beauty within. It reveals the love that is already there. So that is that same light, and that's the same sun within that is always willing to be shining if we let it. Another experience that has stayed with me for a long time is when my daughter, who's now 5 years old, was a baby. I was bathing her in her little bathtub. And when you're a mom and work full time, you want to get things done. So everything becomes a chore. And you move from one thing to another. Now I have to feed, now I have to change, now I have to do this, now I have to bathe. And if you're not aware of it, it becomes so automatic that you miss it. And at some point I was bathing her, and I thought, I do not want to miss this moment. I want to be here fully present. So till today I remember the smell of the water, I remember the smell of her skin, the touch of her hair on my hand. And I told myself, remember this. Remember this. So I think those reflections of remembering wake up another remembering, another greater remembering. The same when I was putting her to sleep, and I was holding her in my arms, and I knew this was going to be a very temporary thing. So I told myself, remember this. And in that moment when I was rocking her to sleep, a beautiful phrase has been attributed to Rumi came to mind. And it says, that says, all I know of God is this love. I believe that love can only be found through love. And sometimes it's the reflection of love and beauty that connect us with a much greater love, a much greater beauty. So we don't really need to go anywhere or do very complicated math equations or read a lot of information. Love is all around us. We can only invoke love with love. So whenever we are in the presence of the heart, which is every day, we're in a sacred moment. We're in a sacred moment. And life is a sacred moment. Life is a prayer itself. Well, we like to divide, the moments in which we sit and pray or we sit and meditate, and then the moments we live. But life is the meditation. Life is the prayer. And this is not an excuse not to pray or meditate. Because sometimes, we can talk ourselves out of anything. We can only invoke love with love. In a way, what I feel is that whatever it is within, in the same way we sing a lullaby to someone we want to put to sleep, I believe there is a lullaby to wake up the heart. And it has to be with that same care, with that same delicacy, in that moment in which, you're putting a baby to sleep, you had to be so quiet and you had to be very careful, and there is so much love in that moment. So in the same way, if we want to remember, if we want to wake up the heart, we also need to sing this sweet, gentle, loving lullaby to the heart and say, you're safe. You can speak. I am hearing. I am listening. I will share 2 more quotes with you. Saint Teresa, when she speaks of the soul, she had this vision of the soul being a castle, and within the castle there were 7 mansions. This was an image that represented different states of consciousness. It wasn't just chambers within the heart, but it was states of awareness. And she describes this palace of surpassing splendor in which the king sits. Remember that part? And then she says, but here comes the great point of all. We, on our part, must have a full and hearty determination to make over to him entirely this interior palace. He will never give himself entirely to us until we have given ourselves entirely to him. And Rumi says something very similar, and I took this good translation from my friend Puria Montessori. Rumi says, unless the seeker is absolutely erased, in truth, she will not come into union. Union is not penetrable. It is your destruction. Otherwise, anyone would become the truth. So this is something we have talked about before, but it does require that forgetting to become, those things that we forget, also to become a death, a dying of certain aspects of this human being, and an awakening of what is already there. But it is a type of death. And that's why that is the other condition. We talked about purity. The saints talk about detachment, love, humility. There's a lot of conditions. But eventually it is also this one, this dying of everything that is not that spirit, of everything that is not that divine. And maybe this is something that we can see in the beautiful words of, in Sufism, there is this chant that we can practice as we breathe, as the inhalation and exhalation, as the expansion and contraction. They say, awake to this presence, dying to this love, into this love. Awake to this presence, remember. Die into this love. Forget, let go, surrender. What I love is the fact that they're using the word love. Die into this love. Consider that for a moment. You know, we always feel or think of death of something that we don't like. But die into this love. I think this is a good place to stop. I want to thank you for listening and for your kindness and for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juli. I think you have everyone enchanted and under a spell now. I don't know that they'll be able to speak, but it is an opportunity for questions or comments. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand and I'll bring you the microphone.
I have a comment.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say that with heart math, they say that the heart has a brain. And to me, that was a big revelation many years ago to realize that not only do we have this brain, but we have a heart brain.
Yes. Yes. And we haven't looked into other organs.
Is there another question? Or? Question? Okay.
Good.
Should I do one of those going once, going twice? Well,
I like
no,
that actually. That's good.
You know, it's, as I said, it's sometimes questions are unnecessary, and sometimes that says a lot more than when there are a lot of questions. So thank you so much, Juli. I really appreciate that. And as Juli did mention, on Saturday she's teaching an all-day workshop from 10:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And it's not kind of a work, it's a meditation day, a day of meditation. It's actually something that we've been doing on a yearly basis at around this time of year, the White Lotus Retreat. And this one is, the title of it is Heart-Centered Meditation. So it'll be the practice of a lot of what Juli has been speaking about this evening. And the day will be, the schedule will be paced to allow for meditation, discussion, teaching, and I'm sure it'll be very enjoyable and very rewarding. If you would like to participate in that day, please go to our website and you can register for that. Also on Saturday, on the same day, but a different activity. Between 1 and 2 p.m. there is a, for the first time, World Labyrinth Day event that's going to take place where we have a labyrinth on the campus there, and I hope it's not too difficult to get to because of all the rain we've had, but we've thought that we'd start doing this on a yearly basis as well to commemorate and celebrate the meaning of the labyrinth, and it's an opportunity for you to experience walking the labyrinth and learn more about it. And if you're not coming to Hooley's workshop, at least come to that one. You've got a choice there. I'd come to Hooley's workshop. Thursday next week, our speaker will be Reverend Cynthia Jo Wright. She's Cherokee. She has Cherokee roots and has explored the Cherokee traditions and indigenous ways by being mentored by tribal leaders and educators from the Cherokee, Creek, Lakota, Dakota, Sioux, and many others. So she came here last year and did a ceremony for us and gave a short talk, and I was so impressed by her presence and her knowledge and her teaching that I really worked hard to invite her to encourage her to come up, because she has to drive quite a long way to come up here. So she's going to do a Thursday evening lecture next week, The Medicine Wheel, Finding Peace and Balance. And then on the Saturday, she's also going to do a morning workshop on the indigenous guidance for today's world. And in the afternoon, there is a series of ceremonies that she's going to be kind of leading, I think, and that's between 2 and 4:30 p.m. So it's she's doing quite a lot of different programs, but even if you can't come to all of them, please take the opportunity and maybe come to some of the programs, and you can find more information about her talk and her workshops in our program catalog or our website. Thank you all for coming this evening, and come again. Enjoy some refreshments, and maybe those questions that you were not up to asking in public, you can ask in private. Thank you.
Thank you.